I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Gibel and Jarawar people, the traditional custodians of the land in which we live today. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders listening today. I'd like to forewarn that this story may contain images of deceased persons. While I now live in Queensland, I was born in East Gippsland, Victoria, a small city called Bairnsdale. We grew up near rivers and beaches and were always outside exploring. This gave us a connection to nature and a feeling of belonging. I feel the Indigenous culture was well represented and visible in my childhood community, and in fact my first cousins identified as being Aboriginal. This was met with negative comments within my family, and violence within their family was not screened from us children, and we were often a witness to this. My husband, my son and I live in a tiny town called Southbrook. A population of almost 600 people. We live in the middle of two towns called Pittsworth and Wyreema. Toowoomba is the main hub, and my focus will be mainly on these towns and the visibility and value of First Nations culture, viewpoint and country. Standing from my veranda, you will see a typical rural community. Like everywhere else around here, it's been years since we had decent rain. Driving the 10 kilometres to Pittsworth, you will see Pioneer Avenue to honour our district's pioneers. With a population of just over 3,000 people, 2.8% of residents are of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent. According to the General Practice Training website, by the 1840s, European diseases such as syphilis, smallpox and influenza had decimated the population considerably. Further on towards Yandilla Street, Indigenous culture is not represented at all. My husband vowed his disbelief and said there has to be some somewhere. We were pleased to see the local kindergarten with an Aboriginal mural, but I suggested it was part of their curriculum and were required to display this for coming generations. Every Anzac Day at dawn, my family gather at the Soldiers' Memorial. My son was an army cadet and we were proud to see him represent his unit. The only flag you've seen flying was the traditional Australian flag, and no Indigenous or reference to any other culture is mentioned. Is this because they weren't classed as Australian citizens until 1967, and Aboriginal peoples lied for the right to fight for the country that was theirs? Last Anzac Day, a high school student prepared a speech including and referencing Aboriginal people's involvement in the wars. I currently am employed as an educator at Wyreema Early Education. Room names are made up of Australian pioneers. I am pleased to say an acknowledgement of country is done at the beginning of each day. Significant cultural events are celebrated. While this is usually at the educator's discretion, in the past I've always found it important to educate and make children aware of different cultures. The name of the town Toowoomba is the Aboriginal people's pronunciation of the English word swamp. Driving and walking the town, culture is visible in places such as Toowoomba Hospital, Carball Medical Services, parks and council meeting places. The Toowoomba Regional Council named the recent construction of the $1.6 billion bypass Multugurra Way. Multugurra was a spiritual leader of the Jagara Nation, who in the 1830s and 40s was killed during a battle with European settlers on Tabletop Mountain. While the traditional owners disappeared long ago and the land as they knew it has gone, it has become a town of diversity, inclusion and unity. Feeling the concrete under your feet as you walk and the wind in the trees of these meeting places, I often wonder what would life have been like post-colonialisation. What about if we lived in harmony and adopted some of their ways? After researching the visibility of First Nations cultures, viewpoints and country in my local area, I realised in my own practice I rarely considered how visible and how valued First Nations were. My experiences in early childhood have been limited at best due to the ignorance surrounding the negative connotations of the Indigenous community. Through engaging with course content, I've been made aware of post-colonial history and the plight of First Nations peoples. I'm more aware and have a deeper understanding and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture.